This conversation is brought to you ad-free thanks to the generous support of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon community. To gain access to early release of all episodes, the full podcast archives, and other extras, visit patreon.com/Howl in the Wilderness. Elizabeth Nelson, thanks so much for joining me once again on the podcast. It's great to see you again.
It's good to see you too, Brian.
I've gotten so much good feedback on our previous conversation, and as I was telling you off recording, that women I see in my practice, in my counseling practice, this theme about female empowerment, the warrior woman, has really been coming up a lot. And so I've been pointing people to our conversation about your book, Psyche's Knife, and a lot of women have really found something helpful in that. And so, as I navigate these current times that are full of so many different types of trouble, my orientation is to look for myths and mythic figures that can help to inspire us to make, let's say, more kind of creative responses to what's going on in the world, rather than, just give in to despair and helplessness.
Yes.
And so I thought about you, and I checked in with you and said, this is kind of what I'm seeing in my practice. Some of these figures are coming forward. Have you had any thoughts about this? And you said, well, why, yes, I have. And you sent me you sent me a presentation that you'd done on the warrior allies embodied crones. And I thought, well, this is great. Of course, Elizabeth had been thinking about this and working with some of these figures. So yeah, I wanted to invite you on to offer some of this up to the listeners. So thank you.
Thank you. I am glad to have this conversation. I think it's very well timed for so many reasons for so many of us. Not all of us, but so many of us.
Yeah. And for people only listening, if you don't see Elizabeth in her nook there, she's got some swords hanging right behind her. And so you've been practicing weaponry and martial arts for most of your life, right?
I have off and on. It's very interesting. I started my first martial arts study when I was in my 20s, and I was practicing Taekwondo for about 3 or 4 years. And then I left off with that. And while I was writing my master's thesis, which had nothing to do with weaponry, as it turns out, my roommate at the time said, "You're spending too much time in front of the laptop. Come take this theatrical combat class with us." So I started taking stage combat and studied that for about 4 or 5 years as well. Picked it back up again when I moved to Los Angeles. And I just love it. So the weapons behind me are a broadsword, a rapier, and a dagger. And then my other favorite weapon that I use in performance, this is stage fighting. Performance fighting is a quarterstaff. And then now, just since the 2024 presidential election, American presidential election, the day after the election, I decided to return to martial arts. I was bound and determined to be able to defend myself as completely as I possibly could, particularly in a culture that seems to think that women's bodies belong to men.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I am now studying Aikido. I'm in
Ah.
my second year, and it's a very different form, but it works well for me as an older person, and I love it.
Hmm.
Absolutely love it.
I've been fascinated by Aikido. I've studied a bunch of different martial arts throughout my
Mhm.
life. And Aikido is one of those ones that in the men's movement in the 90s, some of those leaders were, they would bring Aikido masters to the conferences. And so they always recommended Aikido as a martial art for men to find that warrior spirit. Um, And I guess I've stayed away from it because I don't want to get thrown around so much. I fear for, I like to do other things like running and paddleboarding and pickleball and things like that. And I just think about getting thrown around by some big, tough Aikido master and like, oh my God, I won't be able to move for 3 days. I mean, how do you manage it?
Well, for one thing, the our instructors, our black belt instructors are fantastic. Our senior instructor, our sensei, is a remarkable, remarkable man. But the black belts are very careful when they're training us lowly white belts to protect us, basically, to make sure that we are safe. And but it is, it's a little bit frightening. It's definitely different than for me, another activity that I love that's really good for my mental serenity, my emotional serenity is cycling. I do a lot of cycling. Um, so do I get thrown? Yes, but not. One of the first things that we learn is how to fall safely. Um, is it scary? Yes. Is it exciting? Yes. Is it a spiritual practice for me? Without question. And it's really, I don't think that there is one right way to find sort of safe groundedness for any woman, but I think it's important for all women to return to the body as their place of safety and strength and fluidity, to be able to move through the world um, with this strong, grounded sense of self. I think that's what we need right now when the world is so full of chaos. We need that individual sense of grounded self. And I get that through my Aikido practice.
Yeah. When I work with men, I talk about this, like the importance of training in martial arts, but also other things. It could be dance. Any kind of movement really will help you to develop what I call physical confidence, which
Yes.
is different than kind of psychological confidence. And just that connection to your body and knowing that you have the ability to move, that you've got strength and all of that, I think lends you a certain sense of well, confidence, but also like on the other side of that, like an ease,
Yes.
you
Yes,
know?
I completely agree. The other thing I think that's important is that when you do any sort of physical practice that builds strength but also flexibility, you learn a lot more about choice. Where can I move? Which is not merely a physical insight or lesson. It's also something about that's a mental insight, an emotional insight. There's so we learn on multiple levels, I think, through any kind of an embodied practice, whether it's, pickleball or Aikido.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's such a good point that knowing that you have kind of multiple options in any
Yes,
given moment,
yes.
physically, but yes, also psychologically, that kind of
Mhm.
adeptness and agility and flexibility,
Mhm.
physically and psychologically, they do go hand in hand. I mean, that's how I found, the best therapies for me have been these kind of integrated practices,
Yes.
and they have a immediate response on your regulating your nervous system, and they have all these kind of rippling or downstream effects, and they
Yes.
do remind us that we are a whole organism. They put us
Yes.
back together in a way.
They put us back together in such an important way. I mean, the fundamental premise of any kind of somatic psychology is, you can begin to learn or heal or both through the body first. It can be bottom up as opposed to top down. It's not necessary to intellectually understand something first. You can actually begin to get it in the body, and then it will sort of seep upwards into thinking, into ideas. So you can profoundly change your orientation to any current issue, any moment in your life, and especially something where we're in a situation where we're placed off balance for some reason. Maybe it's a news headline, or maybe it's an argument we had with a loved one. Whatever it is that kind of tilts us off balance into an sort of an extreme position, or even into just like a fixed position. We sort of dig in our heels and say, this is the way it is. That kind of somatic approach, if you have a sense of the fluidity of the entire body mind, the whole system, you can begin to observe your own physical rigidity in a moment of emotional or mental rigidity, and begin to kind of move out of it just by playing with physical motion.
Mm,
It's an odd kind of approach, and many people underestimate it. They think we have to start with thinking,
mm,
but in fact, you can start with, okay, I'm really activated in this moment. I really want to fight or flee, but what if I just breathed and sort of found my way, find the fluidity in my stance. Maybe just move my feet, side to side, or relax the soles of my feet and see if I can feel the earth, you know. So
mm,
it can begin with a simple somatic move.
mm. And I think, this is my bias as someone who kind of I got into, maybe I'd say, like, my healing journey, let's say, through yoga primarily, and then
Hmm.
found my way to depth psychology because I was looking for ideas and concepts that helped me to frame the experiences that I had through yoga and shamanic practices. So I kind of came at it from the ground up, let's say. And
Yes, you did.
well, and I do think that, like, in our culture, which is so kind of, the thinking function is so dominant in our culture, that maybe it's even better to start with the body so that we don't just get hung up on concepts. And, the mind and the ego is so good at thinking, oh, I understand that, therefore I've got it.
Hmm.
Eureka, I've got
Yeah.
it. All I needed was, like, to get it, but then to, like, integrate it and embody it, then maybe becomes a whole nother struggle for people. So I think, let's just start, like, with the body. And I always think about Parliament Funkadelic had a song, "Free your mind and your ass will follow." And but I flip that. I say,
Exactly.
free your ass and your mind will follow. And
Exactly.
I really
That
believe
that's
that.
that's somatic to the core right there. Yep. That is it. But I do want to say, I mean, I agree with you. I have a somatic bias. I do believe that just knowledge of the mind is insufficient. It needs to be embodied. And I like beginning with the body, but there are many people who are not at home in their bodies. The
Yeah.
body is not a safe place for a variety of reasons. And so for them, the journey to really be in the body is more fraught.
Mhm. Oh yeah, I totally get that. I remember, back when I was really going through my midlife upheaval, and, you know, my soul was providing me with lots of symptoms to get my attention. Like
Yes.
having panic attacks while in Shavasana yoga class when you're supposed to be at your most relaxed and just let go. I'd be lying there thinking that I was having a heart attack, and I'd have to get up and go outside and go for a walk around the block. But I remember, like, sitting in a sauna, for instance, and just having no stimulus, nothing to distract me, and how uncomfortable that was for me. And having to slowly build up my tolerance just for sitting still, being quiet without any stimulus, just to be with myself.
Yes.
I mean, it took such a long time, and I really had to like sweat through it. I mean, it was so good, I think, to do it in a sauna, raise the
Mhm.
intensity and how much can I tolerate, and then figuring out, oh, well, if I breathe, my tolerance increases, But yeah, so I totally get it, and I am sympathetic to people and like to maybe lead them into the body slowly and gently.
Mhm.
And there's so many good ways to do that. But I also do think I've found that a good idea can be the best therapy. And that's one of the reasons why I love Hillman and his therapy of ideas.
Yes, yes, yeah. I don't want to ever underestimate the power of an idea. A good idea works on us. As Hillman
Yeah.
says, ideas inform our behavior, they inspire our behavior. Um, yeah, without question.
hmm And I think one of the ways that we can be exposed to or imbibe good ideas is through story and myth.
Mhm.
So you sent me a lecture when I reached out to you. You sent me a lecture that you had prepared and presented on the warrior allies and body crones. And you
Mhm.
focused on, I think, three main figures, right?
Yes.
Ninshuber, Baubo, and Artemis.
Mhm.
And I'd love for you just to kind of tell their stories and what they represent to you, what aspects of, let's say, female empowerment or creative responses to trouble. I just want to leave it open. Who do you want to start with, or who wants to start with you?
Oh. Who wants to start with me? I think it's interesting. They're all clamoring for attention. I got to say that. Me first, me first. I'm going to start with Ninshuber because she's the oldest. So Ninshuber is a character from the Sumerian tradition. So that predates the Greek classical tradition by at least 1,000 years. And the other two figures, Baubo and Artemis, are Greek classical figures. So Ninshuber is the warrior ally that I spoke about several months ago, and she is the, if you will, the assistant to the goddess of heaven and earth, Inanna. So the major Sumerian divinity of the upper world of heaven and earth is Inanna, queen of heaven and earth. And she has a dark sister who is the queen of the underworld, the Sumerian underworld, which Wolkstein and Kramer translate as the great below. So Inanna decides to visit her sister, and she's not exactly sure what's going to happen. And so she tells her warrior woman, she refers to Ninshuber, her assistant, as her warrior woman, to wait at the edge of the world for 3 full days and nights, 72 hours. And if she doesn't return, to go to the gods and see about rescuing her from the underworld. Turns out this was very good strategic thinking, which you would expect from the Queen of Heaven and Earth. And because as soon as Inanna descends into the underworld, she's killed by her sister. And her corpse is hung on a meat hook, essentially, for 3 days where it rots. But Ninshuber is loyal. She's patient. She is obedient. I mean, she loves her queen, and so she waits at the edge. And after 72 hours, no Inanna, and she moves off and looks for a god that will help release her beloved queen from the underworld, and she ultimately succeeds. But without that Ninshuber function, without a warrior ally, that's what I think of it as a warrior woman, a woman who is strong and patient and loyal and persevering. Um, we, I don't think individual women can survive the underworld journey. So mythically, the underworld journey is depicted in numerous traditions all over the world. The contemporary name for it is clinical depression. So the underworld journey, the descent into the underworld, is essentially a depression where we just fall out of life or we descend out of life to a kind of a realm that we cannot negotiate, and it feels like death for us. So these myths of descent into the underworld illuminate the experience of depression. So I love, I mean, if I had a wish for every woman who is undergoing any kind of crisis in her life, any sort of underworld journey at all, and there are many, many reasons we do this, I would wish all of them to have a Ninshuber, a warrior woman, a loyal friend, an ally, who has all of Ninshuber's qualities. So that
Mm.
is one of the characters who I just love. Um, the second character
Oh,
that I love.
sorry, before we go on,
Oh, yeah,
I just want to open that up a little bit more. So do you
absolutely.
mean it's kind of highlighting the importance of an actual literal friend who will be steadfast
Yes.
by your side as you go through your underworld descent? Or are we talking maybe also about some kind of inner quality?
It can be both. Certainly, it's an inner quality that I think we cultivate over time. Um, My own experience of this is that when we're going through our first descent, which is a confrontation with the shadow in Jungian terms, it's always a defeat for the ego, and we simply either we don't or we rarely have the kind of inner strength to be our own strong ally, as well as the one who's undergoing the descent. So I think, with the first kind of a descent into the underworld, we probably do need an external witness, an ally, someone who will be there for us, steadfast and fierce, patient, persevering.
Mm.
Mhm.
Well, that's a nice way to think about the role of a therapist, even. I mean, if people don't
Absolutely.
have, a friend or family member who can be there for them in that
Mhm.
way, to think of the therapist as that type of person, the warrior ally. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, as you're mentioning that, absolutely, a therapist can certainly serve the Ninshuber role without question. There's also what's called the witness in some kinds of movement practices, which is another way of thinking about this character is or this function. Thinking about it as a function is kind of a witnessing sort of a function. But as you were saying this, and another image came to my mind, which is I can recall once when a friend of mine was undergoing something like this. It was a real crisis. And what happened that surprised both of us is that he was just flat out in bed. He just couldn't move. He was that stricken by what was going on. And what happened was his cat hopped up on the bed and curled up right over his heart and would not leave.
Hmm.
So I wonder about animal companions that can
Hmm.
do this for us. I wonder about if, in a more of a shamanic sense, maybe a spirit animal that can do this for us.
Hmm.
So I think opening up our imagination to all kinds of ninshubers is
Yeah. Oh, that's
probably
so
a good
good. And
idea.
yeah, you triggered a memory for me. I was I was in an ayahuasca ceremony out in the high desert in Oregon years and years ago, and we were in a actual caldera, so a
Yes.
crater. So we were in that depression, like kind of in the underworld a little bit. And I
Wow.
had one of the most challenging experiences I'd ever had. And I ended up having to crawl away from the group, and I made myself like a little nest in
Mhm.
in this tall grass that was kind of off to the side. And I was just going through I was in misery. I mean, I was descending and descending. And the one thing that provided me comfort was I had a vision of one of our dogs, my little buddy, Kingston, who was miles away back home, but he appeared there for
Yes.
me. And just his kind of loving, grounded presence, I really feel like is what got me through that experience. So
Yes.
in a way, he was my Ninshuber, just waiting for me at the opening to the underworld, and just me knowing that he was there was enough to get me through.
There you go. That's a
Yeah.
great, great example. That's a great
Oh,
story.
oh, and I'm just feeling the memory of him right now. He passed a few years ago.
Oh.
Gosh, I didn't expect for Kingston to show up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we never know when these companions show up. We can't predict it, but all we can do is say thank you.
yeah, yeah.
No, God.
Yeah, well, it really hits me emotionally, that role of the
Hmm.
Ninshuber, of the
Yeah.
steadfast warrior ally, who's just gonna not try to like help you out, actually, but just to be there, to wait, to keep watch.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Keeping vigil. I love
keeping
that word,
vigil,
vigil.
right.
It's another word for it.
And remind me, I may be getting the Inanna myth confused. I recorded a podcast a few weeks ago with a woman who specializes in Inanna and other
Mhm.
goddess myths, especially ones having to do with Dissent. So this is very timely.
Mm.
But I may be getting mixed up. But does Ninshuber not play a drum while she's keeping vigil? Or am I mixing her up with someone else?
I don't recall that in the translations that I've seen, but it certainly is possible. Yes.
Okay, I might be
Yeah.
mixed up. I'll have to
I
go
don't know.
back.
I mean, I love the image of Ninshuber with a drum, so
Well, it just because as you're descending, to then be able to even to hear
yes.
that your ally is there, keeping watch, keeping vigil for you. There's something about that reminds me of something that John Lee talked to me about once. In terms of, okay, so you a friend calls you, they need your support, right? They need to just vent or to pour out their grief to you. And he said, men are so conditioned to want to say something that will help or to offer a solution or some advice. And he said, sometimes the best way that you can support someone, he's like, it sounds like this. I hear you.
Yeah. Yes.
Just that sound, that breath, that letting someone know that you're there and you're feeling along with them, you're with them.
Yeah.
That's like the beating of the drum. It's just like I'm here. I got nothing to offer other than my presence, my heart.
And the breathing, the sound of the breath means that you're not, as the witness, as the companion, you're not defended against what's happening through not breathing. You're taking it in and letting it out. There is a relationship between you and the other person in this field. You're united by breath. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's something about the audible breath that
Yes.
is very kind of vulnerable in our culture. You know,
Very.
to take a deep, calming breath is somehow taboo in our culture. Like it's so intimate. And I think that's why people often restrict their breath so much, is because it reveals so much about what you're feeling, you know?
That certainly could be true. I think a lot of us don't realize how much low-level anxiety we're living with right now,
Yeah,
and part of that is shallow breathing.
yeah,
We don't
yeah,
even we don't even know that we're breathing shallowly.
yeah.
Yeah. The
Oh
breath.
my God. Yeah, the breath.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And you were gonna move on. I stopped you, and I'm
I
glad I'm
That's
glad we
okay. I'm
did,
glad you
but
stopped me because this is much more fun, with this, the back and forth. I get very excited about these figures though, so you do have to stop me. Um, so the next one I think who wants our attention is Baubo, and she is a minor character. She's also known as Iambi, in the Homeric hymn to Demeter. And these were hymns, poems, basically, that were written down around 800 BCE. And in the hymn to Demeter tells the story of the descent into the underworld of the maiden, basically Demeter's daughter, who at the beginning of the journey has no name. And so once Demeter once the daughter is abducted and Demeter is absolutely in grief and she's enraged. And at one point, she visits the home of a queen, and you've got a whole group of women that are together. And the queen, Demeter, by the way, let me back up. Demeter is traveling through the world, sort of in grief, but also in a disguise, or she's attempting to disguise herself because she's so focused on her own sadness and loss. So she visits the home of a queen, but the queen immediately knows the minute she lays eyes on Demeter, she doesn't know who she is, but she knows she's in the presence of a divinity, right? So you've got this whole group of women, how I imagine it anyway, all together, the queen and her daughters, Demeter, and there is this ancient crone figure who's part of this gathering. She's called Iambe or Baubo. Um, and she also, everybody is trying to figure out how do we move Demeter out of this intense grief, this woman who's lost so much. And Baubo does this absolutely bawdy, lascivious dance, including lifting up her skirts and exposing her genitalia. And she makes Demeter laugh. And so it's a kind of a somatic release, but it's the laughter of women. It's the laughter of women enjoying this bawdy, lascivious, wrinkled old crone, laughing about sexuality, female sexuality together, right? No men, but just women together, and Demeter laughs. And that's the beginning of her movement out of her grief. So laughter is a kind of medicine.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
Yeah, and that relationship between humor and sexuality is also something that you talk about.
yes, yes.
Yeah, can you go into that specifically as it relates to women?
Yeah, there is this sense of there's this idea, I think when you have a group of women together, you know, we often, or maybe not often, but we do talk about sex with each other, and we're very honest about it, at least in my experience. And we laugh a lot because of some of the myths about sexuality that pervade the culture. So there's a sense in which I think when you have a group of women together, you can begin to get a sense that our sexuality is our own to enjoy, just as our bodies are our own to enjoy. It's not necessarily to serve some kind of procreative purpose, which of course what many religions tell us, that the purpose of sexuality is to give birth to children. It's like you get a group of women together, especially with a body old crone, and they're going to say, the purpose of sexuality is joy. So let's enjoy our bodies.
I have to tell you, my experience of men is there's, I'm trying to think, as you're relating this, I'm trying to think of examples where I've been hanging out with men where there's been talk of sex and there's been humor as well.
Mhm.
And which is a kind of a tragedy. I mean, when I've hung out with gay men, there's a lot of humor when
Yeah,
talking about sex.
yeah.
But with like kind of straight hetero men, if they're talking about sex at all in any kind of revealing way, which is itself rare, it's mostly just, you might make a joke just to kind of deflect or to defend against any kind of vulnerability or openness, which is really quite sad. So just thinking about the role of humor in diffusing kind of like seriousness or something like that too. Kind of like it opens things up, right?
Yes.
Like one of the things that I'll often point out to people is the importance of the diaphragm. We were talking about the breath earlier, and for me, the breath is so primary. But the role of the diaphragm, I think of the diaphragm as the seat of the soul because
Mm.
the diaphragm moves when we're breathing, of course, but the diaphragm moves in a kind of more ecstatic way when we're laughing, when we're sobbing deeply,
Yes.
and when we're having an orgasm. It's
Yes.
like the same movement,
Yes. Yes.
and so if you
Yeah.
want to free up your breath, you know,
Mhm.
laugh, cry, or fuck, you know?
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly. There's something, and the thing that I love about all three is that it immediately brings us into the body.
Mhm.
And either, hilarious laughter, like this story of Baubo and Demeter and Metanira and her daughters, or a really good cry. All of it, what I notice is once the laughter or the tears subside, there's a kind of or once you've completed your orgasms and you're kind of laying there, the whole body just gets softer and more vulnerable. It's like there's just this incredible release of tension.
Mhm.
And it's a release down. It's a release down into the earth.
Mhm. Yeah, the
Um,
belly laugh,
belly
the
laugh.
deep sobbing,
Yes,
the
deep
good orgasm.
orgasm. It's like, you're
Yeah. And
just,
then, yeah, then the afterglow.
and the afterglow. Yeah, the peace afterwards is just, peace is not, it's, I think that's too small a word. I want to use the word serenity instead.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
serenity captures it better.
Santosha is a good Sanskrit word, which is like a deep contentment with what
Oh, that's a
is.
wonderful word.
Yeah.
Santosha?
Santosha. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I'm going to keep remembering that word. That's a great
Yeah.
word.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like as a man, I think most men have had this experience, especially when they're younger, where they'll make love to a young woman and be totally confused that she cries afterwards, and they'll scramble and think, did I do something wrong? Is it bringing up some kind of trauma?
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. It's released some kind of held emotion, and then the laughter, but often the tears come, the sobbing.
Yeah.
And so it's not reflective of what just happened, but what it kind of opened up for the person.
Yes. Yeah. But it can be very confusing to your lover.
Yeah.
Very confusing. I think especially to a male lover. Um, yes. Yeah. Because our culture entrains men to be so, to have it all together, and to do things right, which includes performing right,
Yeah.
with your lover. So,
Right. And like the successful performance leads to simply pleasure, but a kind of, an idea about pleasure that it is
mhm.
is happy, ecstatic, joyous. But there's also a deep pleasure in any kind of release,
Yes.
even the release of grief. And oh my God, it is
Yeah.
physically pleasurable.
Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It is. Um, we just went to see a movie last weekend. And it's a very funny movie, but it's also very, very moving. And I sobbed unexpectedly. I sobbed for the last at least 90 minutes of the film. And I was not expecting that at all. And I was also so grateful for the release because the
Mm.
serenity that came in its wake was just Tremendous.
Would it be too personal to disclose what the film was?
Not at all. It was Project Hail Mary, which is
Oh,
a
really?
tremendous film. Yes.
Yeah.
And yes, it was a tremendous film. Now I was in a way primed for grief because we just had to put down one of our beautiful kitties about 3 weeks
Oh,
ago. So we were already in a grief process, and there were some other personal things going on. And but it was a tremendous film about friendship and interspecies communication and loss and death. And, so there I was sitting with, all of my feelings of grief about our kitty Chesterton, and then this film, and I just lost it. And I didn't mind. I just sobbed quietly in the theater, trying to be quiet so I didn't, disturb the neighbors on either side of me.
yeah.
But I was like, this is I can't remember who somebody said this, that if the entire world could simply just cry for 24 hours, we would all be living in a healthier place.
Yeah. To watch or listen to the full episode, become a free or paid member by visiting patreon.com/howl in the wilderness, or by downloading the Patreon app to your mobile device. Paid memberships start at just $5 a month and offer a number of benefits, including early access to all episodes, the full podcast archives, and the satisfaction of knowing that you're supporting an independent creator directly. Thanks.